So I want us to take a look at CSS borders in this video. I think we're actually done with CSS padding and that of the margin, and we want to take a look at CSS border right here. And I do have a folder that I've really created called the CSS borders, and I have nothing inside of it. And that is just what is actually opened in my Visual Studio right here. So I want to go ahead and create basically two files in here. First one is actually going to be an index.html, and let's get that opened. And then we want to create another file, and we're going to just basically use that for the styling. So we call that style.css, and it's opened right here. So what I want to do is to first of all, let's generate our HTML boilerplate. So if I hit exclamation and then hit tab, it's going to give me this. Let's give this a title. So this is going to be CSS borders, and within the body right here, I just basically want to create a div in here, and I'm going to just basically do that right away. So that's going to be a div. So this is going to be div, and if we have that in there, I want to go ahead and give that a class, and let's say that the class name is actually going to be test dash box, which is just what we can actually use to style this within our CSS. So I do have that right here. I want to close that div. So within this place, we can have a text if we want to, maybe something like, let's say try, or let's say try changing border style. So we can write anything we basically want to write in here, but I'm just basically going to leave this at what it is right here. However, if I get into my CSS right here, I want to write a couple of a style for the CSS. And the first thing I want to do is to reference to this class right here called a test box right here. So if I copy that and then get in here, and since it's a class, we can use the dots to reference to it. So if we do this, we can throw in our curly braces, and then whatever we write within this particular place, as long as it actually corrects CSS properties and values, it's going to begin to affect this particular thing that we have in here. All right, so what I want to do is to first of all, I would like to open this up in the browser. So if we go to the folder and open this up, you see that we do have that text. Try changing my border right here, border style or whatever we typed in there. So let's go ahead and then start working on the CSS in here. The first thing I want to do is to give that particular border a width, and let's say this is actually going to have something like 300 pixels. And next thing I want to do is to go ahead and then give that a height. So I'm going to just give this a height, and let's say the height is actually going to be 150 pixels or whatever you want to give that. So I'm going to just do 150 pixels right here. And after that, let's set a padding. We've already worked with padding, so we should know what that does. So it's going to be 20 pixels. And then after that, we can maybe give this a background so that this can be a lot more visually appealing or even understandable. All right. So maybe the background I'm going to give this, let's call this, maybe it's going to be something like light, let's say light yellow right here as the background, but you can use any background that you prefer. And now the next thing I want to do right here is, if we save the changes the way that it is right now, let's just take a look at that. So let's just take a look at that in our browser and then see whether that is actually coming together. So if we refresh in here, okay, you see that the style is not actually coming in, and that is because we haven't actually linked the two files together. So if we want to link them together, we can do that within the head region of your HTML right here. So I want to do that right here. So this is going to be, I'm going to just do link, and this is going to be link, and then we'll do rel style sheet, and then we can go ahead and then specify the file name, which is just basically called a style.css. And with that, if we now go to our browser right here and then we'll refresh, you're going to notice that that particular color and any other style we typed in there will start coming in. So if we go back to our CSS right here, we want to do a couple more things in here. And the first thing I want to do, so let's try to do a text alignment right here. I want to align the text to the center of the web page. The center of that particular box that is right there. So I do this, and the next one I want to do is to just maybe set a font family right there. This is going to be family, and maybe we're going to use something like a sans serif right here. So I'm going to just do sans serif, and then after that, the last thing I want to basically do right here is to just set the box shadow. It's going to be shadow, and I want to set that to a couple of style right here. The first value is going to be 0 pixel, and then I'm going to set the next value to 4 pixels right here. And we can also have something like 10 pixels, and I want to also give that something like an RGBA, which is just going to be like to be able to give a color to the shadow. All right, and I'm going to set the first value to 0, the second one to 0 right here, and the third one is also going to be 0, but I want to give that an opacity. Since this is an RGBA, A stands for opacity right here. So this is going to be, let's say it's going to be something like 0.5 or 0.1, whatever I want to do. All right, so let's make that 0.1 in here. And if we have that in that particular place right here, of course, if we take a look at our browser right here, you see we're going to notice some shadows down here, right? So if you make that a little bit more, let's say make this 0.7, save the changes, and that particular shadow is going to become a little bit more pronounced if you take a look at that. In fact, I think we're basically going to even use that like that. But that's not the major thing I want to do on this video. In fact, let me return that. I don't think we're going to use that so that we will be able to see the border that we're basically working on. So I want to take this back to 0.1. And what I want to do right here is maybe before we get to the shadow, I want to go ahead and then basically give this a border. So remember that a border is just basically a line that runs outside a box like this, all right? So we want to be able to like create a solid line or whatever type of line that you want to basically create to run around an object that is being created like this. So to do that, maybe when I do it, you understand that a lot easier than the way that I'm just basically talking about it right here. All right, and you can use it like maybe find a way to like demarcate objects or even do a lot of things like that. So, and I want you guys to like really understand that when we talk about borders, we do have different types of border. We have solid border. Sorry about that. We do have solid border, and we have something like gray, not really gray, but groove. We have groove, and a number of other types of borders as we move along. But I'm going to show you that for now. I'm going to show you all of that as we move along. But what I want to do first of all is when we talk about border like this, a border do have a border type, and after we talk about a border type, it can also have a color, and after it has a color, we can also talk about the size of that particular border. So we can have a size of a border, right? So all of these things are the things I'm going to just basically specify on this line right here. And to do that, let's say for instance I want to like specify a color for the border right here. So how do I do that? I want to take away the word color right here, even type set. So first of all, let's start with a type which is set to solid, and then the color that I want to basically use can be something like black. So if we do something like black right here, that's just fine. And after we do that, we can also set the size. And how do we do that? It can be something like 5 pixels or whatever we want to do. So let's do 5 pixels right here. All right. So you see how I'm just represented all of those things that we just talked about. So this is the type of border, and this is the color of the border we want to create, and we want to go ahead and then set a size for that particular border right there. So if we save the changes now, and then we'll go to our browser and refresh, you see a black line that is running around this particular place right here. All right. So that one is actually coming from this place where we do have a color right here. I said black in here. And for the thickness, how thick that is coming for the type of the border right here, which is just around 5 pixels around that particular place. All right. And then the next one is basically okay, yeah, of course it's actually thick right there, but we do have the size right here to actually be set to 5 pixels. If we want that to be a lot bigger, we can just maybe do something like 10. If you save that, just watch how that line is actually going to increase. So if we refresh in here, you see that the black line kind of increases. And if you want to change this one, maybe you don't like what this is anymore, and let's say you want to use something like red, remember it's talking about the color right there. If we refresh, you see that it's now red. And the next thing you can do is, okay, the type right here, all right? So we can work with the type. Maybe if you don't want to use something like solid, you can use something like groove. So if I do groove right here, it basically is type of a border. You're going to see that it's going to just give you another type right here. Look at how it's now looking. So there is another color that is just a little bit attached to it. So that's just how groove it kind of looks like. It's almost like a 3D type of effect. That is just basically what it is. And I believe that you guys kind of understand that. And that is just that. Of course, we're going to take this a little bit further, guys. If you don't want to use groove, that is another one that is actually called a dashed. So if I do dashed right here, just watch how that is actually going to look. Watch the type of a black color that is going to run around. You see how that is actually looking? That's dashed for you. So we do have another one that is also called something like, we also have something called a double. So we can change this from what it is right now to double. Save the changes. Let's take a look at that. See how black double lines run around that. And after we do that, we can also experiment with another one, and that one is actually called I think it's called a ridge. So if we do have ridge right here, let's save the changes, and then we'll refresh. So we do have a ridge right there. This is how the ridge looks like. And there is also another one that is actually called I think it's called the insert. So save that as insert, and when we refresh, and notice some changes right there, right? So we also have the one called the outset. So let's take this out and let's just say outset, save the changes, and we will refresh in here. See how that is actually kind of working. So if you take a look at my mouse, beginning from here down to this particular place is a little faint, than beginning from here down to this particular place. So this part is thicker than this part right here. That's outset for you. And I think if there's another one, we've also talked about groove. We have solid. We can also hide this if we want to do that. So there is another value called a hidden. So if I do hidden, I believe this is basically gonna hide the border. It hides the border. All right, we're no longer seeing any border right there. And remember, we're using the value called a hidden. So there is also another value that is also called a none. I think they do almost the same thing. It's also going to hide whatever that we have in there. So basically the same thing. So if you refresh, you're not going to see anything. All right. So this is just basically how borders kind of work. All right. So I'm going to return this to something like, let's say this is going to go back to solid. And there are still some other things you can add to a border. For instance, this border that you're seeing right here, let's say you want to curve the edges. We can do that. How do we do that? We can use something like border radius. So if I do border dash radius, and we can do maybe something like 10 pixels. Save the changes. And then when we refresh, just take a look at these sharp edges. What is going to happen to them? You see that the sharp edges now curve the way that they actually looking right now. So if you want to continue maybe increasing that or even reducing that, you can do that. So if I do 30, you see that that's not 30. Let me do 39. You see that it curves a lot more, right? So that is just that. So I want to take this a little bit further, maybe to like center the whole box that we have on that particular place. And if what you came here to just learn is all about border, you can just pause the video and then move on to the next thing. So what I'm actually going to do right now is a little bit of the topic that we're just basically working on right here. But nothing stops you from staying around and learn it so that you can actually advance your technique of working with that of the borders. So I just basically want to work on the body of the section so that I can actually center the elements right there. So to do that, I'm going to just first of all say display. I'm going to display the body to flex, and the next thing I want to do is to just justify content, and I want to set it to the center. So this is going to be center. And after that, the next thing I want to do maybe is to align the items. So this is going to be align items. It's going to be items, and still going to be set to the center of the web page. And after that, let me set a height right here. I'm just basically going to make use of VH. So this is going to be 100 VH right here, viewport height. And the next one is, let me just do a margin right here. It's just basically going to help push that to the center of the web page. So I'm going to just, if I don't want to set this to auto, let's just basically set this to 0 first of all. If you don't move that, we can set that to auto. But I believe that is actually going to move that. So we're going to have a background. So this is going to be, I don't know how to spell background today. So this is going to be background. And let's say we're going to make use of this particular background. This is going to be F0, 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 like that. And then we can save the changes. So if we take a look at this in our browser, if I refresh this should be moved to the center of the web page. Look at the way that I centered that right there. All right. So, and I hope that you guys kind of enjoyed that. So that's just basically how to work with CSS borders on your web page. So, and I believe you kind of enjoyed that, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. So bye bye for now.